Our next speaker is someone who is incredibly exciting. I am so happy to be able to introduce her to the floor to speak to you. So she's the person who made this all happen, the CEO and the founder of the Good Ancestor movement. We've got Stephanie Brobbey coming to join us on the stage. Please give her a round of applause.
Right then, let's start with a bit of a temperature check. And I'm going to ask you to indicate how you feel about the state of the world today in general. So if you feel positive, I want you to stand up. If you feel negative or you're unsure, stay seated. Okay, those of you standing can sit down. How worried are you about the future of the world in general? If you're very worried, stand up. If you're not worried at all, stay seated. Quite a picture. Thank you. At the Good Ancestor movement, we believe passionately in the importance of approaching each of our gatherings with a sense of common intention and purposefulness, and grounding ourselves in a way that enables us to observe and challenge the prevailing mindsets and narratives that we have all been socialized into. So huge thank you to Debbie and to Jessie for offering such a generous grounding in the reality of where we are today at home in the UK. I don't know what or who brought all 200 odd of you here today, but I'm glad that you made the decision to join us here in Oxford. Perhaps it was curiosity about new and interesting developments or innovation in the private wealth industry. If you're an advisor, maybe one of your clients asked you to attend specifically, or maybe a peer or a colleague might have signposted you to this gathering. Perhaps you're a wealth holder and you heard about this gathering through someone in our community. I recognise that you might have come here holding questions, some of which may be answered today. Others will likely lead to more questions and an opportunity to keep exploring ideas with other attendees, and we hope with the Good Ancestor movement's growing community. However you found yourself here, we're grateful that you have taken time out of your week in one of the busiest months of the year to be with us. And we extend a huge welcome to you all, and we're of course grateful to be joined by familiar faces from our Good Ancestor movement community and our colleagues across the new economy ecosystem and civil society. After a whirlwind 15 months since launching, I've recently been reflecting on my old life, the one before I blew up my successful legal career to start the Good Ancestor movement. I've been thinking about what I really enjoyed about being a private wealth lawyer. For me, the role offered intellectual challenge and academic rigor, which was brought to life by a rich tapestry of complex family systems and characterful clients. In particular, one of the things that I loved was building deep and trusted relationships with clients and fellow advisors. It felt sometimes that I, or more often than not, we, were a vault for some of their most innermost concerns about the present, worries about the future, and sometimes the pain and vulnerability that they lived with constantly. I remember feeling very early on in my career that it was a true privilege to be able to guide people through the more challenging times and to celebrate with them in the very best of times. I always felt very fortunate to work alongside a community of private wealth professionals who were technically brilliant, friendly, collaborative, interesting, and kind. On the flip side, that journey also presented some profound challenges for me as an individual. During my time in private practice, I was passionate about social change, ethical side hustles, and strived to use all my platforms, skills, and experience and time outside work towards the creation of a fairer, more just, and sustainable society. Unconsciously, I had separated myself into two parts: a professional self focused on applying technical dexterity a high standard of professional conduct, and nurturing a variety of relationships in service of the overriding objective of preservation and accumulation of private wealth. And a personal self, very much concerned about the climate crisis, the increasing divide between rich and poor, both globally and nationally, and the dramatic changes I was seeing in London, my beloved hometown. There was, of course, some overlap across these identities, but looking back, there was a lack of thoughtful reflection on my part about the type of impact my professional role might be having on wider society. There was never enough time. If I'm honest, a lot of the time I felt like I was on a hamster wheel, trying to deal with client instructions promptly and provide excellent service, issuing invoices efficiently, meeting billing targets, and for the lawyers in the room, doing all of this while recording every task of the day in 6-minute units. Being on that hamster wheel created an environment in which I was able to decontextualize the work I was doing and to disconnect it from the real world. What ultimately led me into the work I find myself doing now was a wake-up call about the kind of society I was living in. I realized that I had been operating as if wealth existed in a vacuum, without any broader social, economic, and environmental context. By now, many of you will have heard me talk about a friend who told me on New Year's Eve in 2019 that there were more food banks than McDonald's in the UK. For me, it was and is still a powerful picture of the state of the nation, where food banks are becoming as commonplace as the largest fast food chain in the world. Several of us are coming together to co-create a new economic story. We at the Good Ancestor movement have the privilege of being in partnership with Rebecca Gowland, the director of Patriotic Millionaires UK, some of whom we'll be hearing from later, Robert Palmer and his colleagues at Tax Justice UK, Guppy Bowler and Noni Makuyana of Decolonising Economics, and a range of people and organisations stretching from here to Central Europe and beyond, working to develop a more expansive vision for the role of wealth in building an economy which ensures that all forms of life on the planet can flourish. For anyone wondering why we are talking about wealth specifically and not philanthropy, let me explain the rationale behind this. We talk a lot at the Good Ancestor movement about the need to decenter philanthropy and our relationship to it. And this requires us to acknowledge that for all its benefits, philanthropy is a byproduct of an economic system which enables certain groups of people across a handful of geographies to accumulate wealth, often at the expense of and to the exclusion of others. And therefore, if we are to transform our society truly, we need to look at the underlying systems of economy and governance. In the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., philanthropy is commendable, but it must not cause the philanthropist to overlook the circumstances of economic injustice which make philanthropy necessary. While there is space for a conversation about the role of philanthropy, its successes and failures, we have chosen to have an important and timely conversation about the role of the trusted advisor in supporting progressive approaches to wealth management within the power and agency available to them at this time. Turning to the business of the day, we have a fascinating array of voices lined up for you. Throughout the day, you'll be hearing from 8 wealth holders, 5 senior advisors, 3 leading civil society figures, 2 economists, 1 tax professor, yay, 1 jurist consult, yes, and interdisciplinary scholar activist, and a leading linguistics expert. And we have a mixture of panels and keynotes this morning and this afternoon. We will end the day with an incredibly special offering in the final keynote from a much-loved member of our community, Louisa Mann, who will be sharing some really important takeaways as well as some of her own story. So you won't want to miss that before we close the formal part of the conference. And we very much hope that you'll stay on for drinks at the Lighthouse pub to continue the conversation with a few of the wealth holders in our community. So all that remains to say is to reiterate how very welcome you are here and to emphasize that today is an opportunity to think differently, to interrogate, to challenge, to listen actively and generously. You're going to hear compelling stories personal accounts, deep expertise, all of which we hope you will engage with meaningfully. This gathering is about interrogating the role of trusted advisors at this moment in time. And it's also about appreciating what it means to be human. The purpose for today is to contextualize everything we do by seeking to envision the kind of world we want to leave behind. What kind of world do you want for your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, godchildren, frankly, any child or young person that you are irrationally crazy about? Let that sentiment guide you, your ideal vision of the world that you would want to see in 50 years' time. The invitation from the Good Ancestor movement today is to lean into your humanity, not just the professions that you represent, to be curious about what you hear from all contributors, to enjoy connecting with people that you might not ordinarily come across in your world, as well as friends and acquaintances from across the industry. And finally, to show up as generous listeners. Thank you.